Okay, and Andrea, we are live.
Welcome to today's telephone town hall with Senator John Walsh. I'm Andrea Helling, Senator Walsh's Deputy Chief of Staff. We're going to be discussing the issues important to you. So if you have a question at any time during this event with Senator John Walsh, please press 0 on the call. Right now, we're dialing out to thousands of people from around Montana to join the conversation. In just a moment, we'll be hearing from Senator Walsh and taking your questions live. If you're just joining us, this is Senator John Walsh's live telephone town hall with folks across Fort Belknap and north central Montana. In a moment, we'll hear from Senator Walsh on the work he is doing in the Senate and his travel around Montana. Throughout the call, if you have a question for Senator Walsh, please press 0 to get into the queue. Senator Walsh will take as many questions as possible. In just a moment, we'll start taking your questions live. If you have a question, please press 0 to get into the queue. And so with that, I'll turn it over to Senator Walsh for some opening remarks. Thanks for joining us today, Senator.
Thanks, Andrea. And thanks to everyone on the phone for taking time to be on this call. I've only been a senator for about 4 months now, but I want to take this opportunity to provide you an update on the issues I've been working on in the Senate. We've got folks on the line from Fort Belknap Indian Community and the surrounding area. And I'm going to open it up to some questions in just a moment. So if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 now. Joining me on today's call are my American Indian staffers, as well as my Great Falls regional staffer. Cinda Bird Meneke is an Army veteran from the Blackfeet Nation. Cinda works out of my Kalispell office. Chris Forstar grew up on the Fort Peck and Fort Belknap reservation and works out of my Billings office. Ben Ward is from the Cowlitz tribe in Washington State, and Bonnie Keller is my Great Falls field director. In my first week as senator back in February, I traveled around Montana Indian Country with Chairman Tester. During that trip, I had the privilege of sitting down with Fort Belknap Tribal Council. I want to say how much I enjoyed that meeting, and I deeply value our partnership. Together we can make real progress in Indian Country. Just today, I co-sponsored a bill that will make tribal colleges eligible to receive grant funding for adult education and literacy programs. This bill will help Montana's 7 tribal colleges deliver valuable training and educational opportunities to Native adults, which are vital to their ability to compete in an increasingly competitive and skills-based economy. Last month, I introduced an important bill to improve the urgency of the Cobell settlement and to ensure that Montana tribes can administer the land buyback program under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act. I also introduced an important bill to help prevent veteran suicides. Montana has the second largest veteran population, and American Indians enlist at a very high rate. Unfortunately, Montana has the highest rate of veteran suicide in the country. That's alarming, and we have to address it. The bill will extend the time when veterans are eligible for VA services and allows a review of wrongful discharges caused by unseen injuries. It also provides additional training for mental health care providers on dealing with veterans and enhances collaboration between the VA and DoD on medical records. If you're just joining us, this is Senator John Walsh. I'm holding a live telephone town hall conversation with Montanans. If you'd like to ask a question, press 0 to get into the queue. Like I said, I've been traveling around Montana and hearing from folks about what's on their minds. Everywhere I go, I hear about the concern about access to quality health care, about long waits at IHS facilities, and high levels of addiction, and the despair and damage it causes in our tribal communities. I know the need for solutions can't wait. The situation requires action, and action now. That's why I'm co-sponsoring legislation that will improve the recruitment and retention of skilled healthcare professionals in IHS programs. It will also prioritize help on the ground in Indian Country to ensure Montana tribal members are getting the care they need and when they need it. Chairman Tester and I called on the GAO to review and report on IHS, paying specific attention to the Billings area office. I'm particularly concerned with the quality and timeliness of care being delivered at IHS facilities and asked the GAO to review pain management protocols and whether they are being followed at IHS clinics. During my trip in February, I was able to visit the Little River Smokehouse, It's a real success story for the Fort Belknap Indian community and a great example of good jobs in Indian country. But I also hear the frustration about the barriers tribes face in developing their resources and creating jobs in their communities. That's why I'm co-sponsoring legislation that will enable tribes to generate economic benefits through increased responsible natural resource development. I know that more economic development in Indian country translates into more sovereignty and prosperity for our tribes. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, press 0 to get into the queue. I haven't been a senator for very long, but I'm already hard at work, getting results for Montana's tribes. Just last week, I introduced the American Indian Teacher Loan Forgiveness Act of 2014 to help recruit and retain teachers in areas where high concentrations of American Indian students live. As I visited Montana communities and reservations, I continue to hear the importance of increasing educational opportunity in Indian country and the value of Native students learning from Native teachers. This bill does just that. I know how important access to registration and voting is in Indian country. That's why I co-sponsored the Native American Voting Rights Act of 2014. This bill strengthens protections for voting access in Indian country and allows tribal IDs to be used during registration and voting. This is a good first step, but more must be done. And I'm developing legislation that will increase early voting opportunities, expand voter registration to federal agencies, and modernize voter registration in Indian country. This morning, I hope to hear directly from you and get a sense of your priorities. Again, press 0 to get in line to ask a question, and I'm looking forward to our conversation. With that, we'll go back to Andrea.
Thank you very much, Senator. And if you'd like to ask a question this afternoon, press 0 to get into the queue, and the Senator will take as many questions as possible. Before we get to questions, we'll do a poll to get feedback from folks on the phone. Remember, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 0. So for our poll question, what do you think is the most pressing issue Senator Walsh should be addressing in Washington, D.C.? Press 1 if it's unemployment in the economy. Press 2 if it's taking care of veterans. Press 3 if it's the federal debt. Press 4 if it's partnering with Indian country. Press 5 if these issues are of equal importance. Again, what is the most pressing issue Senator Walsh should be addressing in Washington, D.C.? 1 if it's unemployment in the economy. 2 if it's taking care of our veterans. 3 if it's the federal debt. 4 if it's partnering with Indian country. And 5 if these issues are of equal importance. So with that, we don't have any questions yet, so if you would like to ask a question, now is your opportunity. Press 0 to get into the queue. As we wait for questions, Senator, why don't you tell me a little bit about the Cobell settlement legislation you introduced with Congressman DeFazio from Oregon?
All right, Andrea, thanks. As I've traveled around the state, I've heard from tribes across to Montana about the land buyback program isn't working well. I introduced legislation to fix the problems I've heard about. This bill will do 4 things. First, it allows tribes to administer the land buyback program under the Indian Self-Determination and Education Assistance Act using 638 contracts. Second, it allows the Trust Land Consolidation Fund to be invested, producing interest on the fund. Third, it ensures money in the fund doesn't just go back to the Treasury if it isn't spent after 10 years. Instead, the money will remain in the fund for land consolidation purposes. And fourth, it also clarifies the Secretary's responsibility to make the second round of payments from the settlement within 1 year. I'm looking forward to working with Montana tribes to overcome the misguided policies of the past and to promote self-sufficiency among the tribes through responsible development of their land. Just a reminder, if you have any questions that you'd like to ask, please press 0 to get into the queue.
Thank you very much, Senator. And as he says, he'll take a question on any topic. Whatever you have on your mind, you're welcome to ask Senator Walsh for his take on it. So with that, Senator, why don't you tell us a little bit about the native language legislation that you're working on?
Great. I'm proud to co-sponsor Chairman Tester's Native Language Immersion Bill. Preserving native language is essential to improving educational outcomes for tribal nations. This bill will establish a grant program to fund Native language immersion programs throughout Indian country, supporting schools using Native American languages in order to improve high school graduation rates, college attainment, and career readiness. I've also co-sponsored the Native Languages Reauthorization Act of 2014. This bill supports and strengthens language immersion programs through federal grants, including support for language nests, language survival schools, and language restoration programs. I know we need to do more to preserve Native American languages in Indian country, and I want to work to make sure that happens.
The Senator wants to hear questions from you this afternoon, so please press 0 if you have a question you'd like to ask the Senator. In lieu of questions right now, we will talk about maybe the tribal energy legislation that you've worked on in the last couple of months, Senator.
Great. I understand that increased economic development in Indian country means more sovereignty and prosperity for tribes. And I've heard directly from tribal leaders about how important it is to remove barriers from tribal energy development. To help tribes develop their resources and provide for their people, I co-sponsored legislation that will eliminate roadblocks and allow tribes to generate economic benefits through increased, responsible natural resource development. This bill will give tribes a more effective and accessible way to develop their energy resources, including conventional fossil fuels and renewable resources such as wind, solar, and energy. I'm committed to improving economic prosperity in Indian country, and I look forward to working with you toward that goal.
Thank you very much, Senator. If you have a question that you'd like to ask the Senator as he's been sharing his update about work for Montana's Indian communities, if you have a question that's come up, please press 0 to get into the queue. Senator, one challenge that a lot of folks in rural areas, particularly in Indian communities, face is access to voting. And I know it's something that you have heard a lot about when you've traveled to all of Montana's Indian communities. So I'm wondering if you can share an update about some of your work to expand voting opportunities in Indian country.
Well, I'd like to cover a little more in detail a critical issue in Indian country today, and that's voting rights. First, I want to say that I welcome the agreement which will allow satellite voting sites on 3 Montana reservations. It is an important first step in expanding voting access in Indian country, but there's more that we must do. The Fort Belknap Indian community has played a key role in this effort, and I look forward to working with the tribes to improve access to voting and registration. One of the first things that I did when I came back to Washington is I co-sponsored the Native Voting Rights Act of 2014. This bill would add federal protections against any state or local law that will have negative impacts on voting on Indian reservations, like removing polling locations. The bill would also allow tribal IDs to be used for voting and registration and would strengthen the Department of Justice's authority to challenging discriminatory laws aimed at tribal voters. I'm also working to draft tribal voting legislation to be considered by the Rules Committee. I recently held a roundtable with Western Native Voice, state legislators, and tribal members back in May to discuss ways to improve access to voting and voter registration. Based on those conversations, I'm developing legislation that will increase early voting opportunities, expand voter registration to federal agencies, and modernize voter registration, like electronic registration. In addition, we want to move the process forward. I will chair our Rules Committee hearing next week to hear about the challenges that rural and tribal voters face, to discuss ways Congress can address these barriers. So I'm really looking forward to hearing from you about how we can work together to improve voting access in Indian country, because I want to make sure that every member of your tribe that wants to vote has the ability to vote and doesn't have to drive hundreds of miles to make their vote count. I'm still looking forward to a great summer. I know it's just getting kicked off, and I'm going to be traveling around Indian country several times over the next few months. So I'm really looking forward to traveling to the summer powwows as well as the parades that are going on. Reminder, If you'd like to ask a question, please press 0 now on your telephone. You know, as a nation, we have a trust obligation to provide for the health and well-being of our tribal members. The Indian Health Service is the most visible and direct provider of these services. Unfortunately, they are failing to meet their trust responsibilities, and Montana tribes are suffering as a result. Of particular concern to me is the failure to provide quality and timely care to patients through IHS facilities. Many tribal members are completely reliant on the IHS to receive medical care, but are forced to endure inadequate services, or in some cases, none at all, and face extremely long delays in receiving basic services such as filling a prescription or seeing a physician for children and the elderly. Delays in what seem like simple healthcare services can have dramatic effects. I have also heard directly from tribal leaders that feel IHS is only meeting half of the health needs in Indian country. It is no secret that IHS struggles with chronic underfunding. While acknowledging these resource challenges, it is even more galling to hear concerns that IHS facilities are not seeking reimbursements from third-party insurers, thereby denying desperately needed capital for these programs. Lastly, I want to convey my grave concern regarding the long-standing vacancies in critical healthcare positions. While these positions remain vacant, tribal members are effectively prevented from receiving the health care they desperately need and that we promise them. So I will continue to work on this issue.
Thank you very much, Senator. As a reminder, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 0. And Senator, as the only Iraq war veteran serving here in the United States Senate, you have a unique perspective on care for veterans, and particularly the challenges that veterans face right now in accessing care. Can you give an update about some of the work you've done over the last couple weeks to bring more attention to the challenges that Montana's veterans are facing?
Well, that's right, Andrea. You know, I served for 33 years in the Montana National Guard. In 2004 and 2005, I commanded the 1st to 163rd Infantry Battalion, where I took over 700 of Montana's finest young men and women into Iraq with me. And when those men and women came home, I was very set on making sure that the healthcare services and as well as all the services that they and their families have earned have been there for them when they need them. So just last week, I'm proud of having a commission that I established included into a Veterans Health Care bill. My commission on care became part of the recent legislation that passed the Senate, and I have my staff at Fort Harrison and Billings VA medical clinics on Wednesday afternoons to hear about issues that may be coming up during with Veterans Health Care. I'm also extremely concerned about the number of suicides amongst our veteran population. Today, over 22 veterans are dying by suicide each and every day. So I introduced the Suicide Prevention for America's Veterans Act to help deal with this issue. I believe that one of the problems that we are facing within the VA healthcare system is we have a lack of healthcare service providers. So what this bill will do will allow those that graduate from college in a psychological healthcare field and come to work for the VA hospital, the military or the VA will pay back their college student loans. Another issue is that normally when you get out of the military, and if you don't have a long-standing injury that will provide you with a disability, you're only covered under the VA system for 5 years. So this bill will extend your coverage from 5 years to 15 years. These are just a couple of things that we're trying to do to focus our emphasis on our veterans so that they can feel like they have somewhere where they can turn if there is a problem. American Indians enlist at one of the highest rates in the nation. So thank you to every veteran on this call. Our country appreciates your service, and I appreciate your service. And I know that many of your members deployed as part of the 1st to 163rd Infantry Battalion. And so you can be proud of the work that they did and what they accomplished. While we were deployed, our unit was awarded with the Glorious Unit Citation for our performance in Iraq. We deployed to Iraq and took the ground that was occupied by an active duty battalion. We spent a year there, and then an active duty battalion replaced our unit. So Montanans can be extremely proud of our service and of the service of the men and women from Montana. I'm proud to also have just given a speech on the floor about the current conflict in Iraq. I think the president should proceed cautiously with regard to what's happening in Iraq today. I think it's time for the Iraqi government and the Iraqi people to stand up and defend themselves. Montanans and Americans have served proudly, and our mission should be over in Iraq. Again, I'd really like to hear from you and some of your questions. So as a reminder, to ask a question, please press 0 anytime during this call. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. This morning, some welcome news happened with the U.S. Patent Office, U.S. Trademark Office, saying that the patent for the name of the Washington football team is no longer a valid patent name. And I'm wondering if you can share your reaction of that, because it's something that you have supported in the past, which is changing the name of the Washington football team.
That's right, Andrea. Another issue that we're working on is the name of the Washington football team. I've signed on to a letter encouraging the team to change the name of the city's professional football team. It is insulting to American Indians everywhere that the team in our nation's capital is using a derogatory term in its current name. Well, again, I appreciate all of you who have stayed on the phone and listened to some of my conversation. And I look forward to seeing you as I travel around Montana. And so again, I want to thank you for being on the call, and thank you for the important work that you're doing, especially in Indian country in Montana. Everywhere I go in Montana, I hear from folks asking me to make responsible decisions, to create jobs, to protect our freedoms, to hold Washington accountable, and to cut wasteful government spending. We're doing that responsibly without hurting the things that are important to Montana, important to our veterans, important to our seniors, our kids, and important to our American Indian communities. The freedoms we can never take for granted are important to me. So if you have any questions, not only right now, but after we hang up off this call, please feel free to give my office a call. The telephone number is 406-761-1574. You can also send me an email by going to my website at www.walsh.senate.gov. Thanks again for your time, and I look forward to talking to you in person. Take care.